Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today for our webinar series, eDiscovery for the Paralegal Advantage. I just have a few slides before I will get into the platform with you, and I see a few familiar names on the registrant list, so thank you again for joining me today. And to those of you who I don't recognize, welcome, and I look forward to sharing some tips with you to hopefully make your jobs easier and your experience using the platform more valuable to you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type those questions to me, and I'll try to answer any that I can during today's webinar. You can also email me directly with any questions that are case-specific, or if you find yourself working in a case down the line and you'd like me to provide a little more of an in-depth answer or help link, shoot me an email and I would be happy to work with you on those questions. We also have weekly series and monthly series of webinars that we offer at no cost to our clients. You can check those out at lexby.com. If you have any questions about those, about any of our previous webinars you would like to view or you would like to register for future webinars, please feel free to contact our marketing department. A little bit about me. My name is Angela. I've been an eDiscovery specialist with Lexby for going on a year. Prior to that, I have been a litigation paralegal with over 15 years experience, so I know the challenges that you face every day as paralegals working in the trenches and also dealing kind of in the new frontier of eDiscovery. My hope is that today I can give you some extra tools in your toolbox, not just as Lexby clients, but as paralegals in general, and that these tools will make your lives easier and your attorneys' lives easier. This will be our agenda today for our Paralegal Advantage webinar, discussing the general eDiscovery procedural overview and the EDRM, which is the Electronic Discovery Reference Model. And I would like to do that before getting into the platform and the specific tools I mentioned that I want to show you in LAP. Many of you are experienced in eDiscovery and will be familiar with some or all of the general overview topics that I'm going to begin with. But for those of you who aren't familiar with these or aren't as experienced in eDiscovery, this should be a nice introduction to just the general industry and legal standards for following eDiscovery protocol. If you are interested in understanding the industry and process better just for your own benefit, I'll mention a few websites and resources once I get a little farther into the webinar that you may want to check out. After that, we'll talk about some Lexby specific features and tools that will accelerate the review process and make your lives easier and remove some of the headaches from those 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon trying to meet a deadline experiences that I know some of you have had. We'll also talk about pre-upload organization. Talk about how you can get the advantage even before you get the data to us, especially if you can have a strong understanding of what's being given to you by your clients. Then that allows you to better communicate with us when you're sending it to us, and we can see things that may be problematic in the platform and communicate that back to you so that we can quickly solve those issues. I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. That allows us to get to those problems and resolve them before we even upload, hopefully, and ingest, instead of when you have a deadline looming and we have to, quickly come up with a resolution for how to deal with those data-dependent issues. We'll also talk about upload. Uploading, for those of you who are more of our DIY clients and like to do the uploading on your own, there are a few things I want to show you to help you identify things like placeholders upon ingestion, how you can handle those from the beginning before your attorneys are reviewing or you are reviewing the documents, and how to answer their questions about the distinction between the placeholders and what can be done about them, so you've got that answer on hand as soon as they ask it. We'll also talk about review and production. We'll talk about identifying inconsistencies in your documents, in your coded documents that you need to resolve, possibly redact, and get all of that squared away before you put your data and your documents into a production, hopefully even in between the review set process and production, so that you're not stuck at the production validation steps. Again, I know there are many of you who are very familiar with that. So I want to show you how to avoid those validation issues before you get there. Again, to take that headache out of the process before you have a deadline upon you and you know that you need to get your production running so that it can finish processing and you can meet your deadline. Most of you will be familiar with our search function, but not all of you may be aware of a few tools or a specific tool that I'll share with you today that will make your running your searches so much faster and efficient and can serve multiple purposes for you in organizing the data, not just running the search itself. It will also help you memorialize what search terms you've run. I'll touch on ESI orders in a few minutes, and starting with that ESI order as the framework of your organization process, making sure that you're checking all the boxes and that no matter who is working with you from your office or our side, we all are aware of the requirements that have been placed on you by the ESI order in your case. And then lastly, we'll go into preparing for hearings, depots, trials. There's a couple tips I'd like to share with everyone on using LexSpeed to get yourself organized and to help your attorneys prepare for those upcoming hearings and depots, and of course for trial. I'll show you how you can isolate and get those documents out quickly, how you can export them, and how to make your life a little easier on the export and then printing of those docs when you are trying to get those exhibits organized. So here we have the eDRM that I was referring to, and its stages. And again, for anyone that's not familiar with what I'm talking about and what we're looking at, this is the electronic discovery reference model. You'll see the source below. The graphic is from Duke Law. You can find it by going to their website. You can find this model on many different websites and platforms, and they may differ slightly in the visual effect, but the basic steps here are unique to the eDRM, and you'll find them. They will be consistent no matter what platform or website you're referring to, what reference you're looking at. So the first step in eDiscovery, the very, very beginning, is the information governance. This applies definitely more for those in-house counsel, the paralegals working for in-house counsel, when you're communicating with your client before litigation has begun, but you know it's looming, and you are notifying your clients, those custodians, that litigation is down the pipeline, and that they have an obligation to preserve and ultimately provide data to you. It is essentially getting your electronic house in order to avoid headaches, to mitigate risk and expense down the line should eDiscovery become an issue. And assuming that you will engage a vendor like LexSpeed, from the initial creation of their ESI and through the final disposition, which would be the opposite end of our model at presentation. Identification is identifying, obviously, the ESI, the sources, locating the potential sources, and determining the scope and depth of the ESI that you will be dealing with. Is your client's data only an email? Is it also data on their hard drive? Will the scope extend to their work phone, possibly their personal phones? Understanding where ESI that will be relevant to the case exists is very important. It helps you when you can communicate it clearly with your client and ask all of those really important questions on the front end, so that gathering all of that data and ingesting it into the platform in one nice, smooth ingestion and transition, giving you everything to look at from the beginning, is important. Preservation and collection are the next two steps that go side by side. Self-explanatory to the majority of you. Preservation would be ensuring that your ESI is protected against inappropriate alteration or destruction by, for example, a disgruntled employee of your client's company. Collecting it is, again, self-explanatory. It's you gathering it, they or them gathering it, gathering that electronically stored info for use in discovery, in eDiscovery, getting it ready for processing and review, etc. One example of collection that you would potentially do for your client, or you would potentially organize or reach out to Lexby to collect for you, would be the collection of an email account or multiple email accounts. If you have a client who has 45 potential witnesses, then you have 45 custodians whose email accounts need to be collected. Preservation can be an important part of the process in the long run to call by date, by person, by pertinent people. You could even potentially pre-call before you put your data into the platform for keywords to avoid having to review extraneous information on your attorney side to keep the hosting costs down. It is a very important step, and when you're organized and you know what you're requesting, it helps you in the long run. Beyond preservation and collection, that's where Lexby steps in. That is where we get involved. We begin processing your data for you, reducing the volume of your electronically stored information and converting it, if necessary, to forms more suitable for your review and analysis. Native files can be a myriad of different file types, and while you can't review an audio file or a voicemail in Lexby, you can review a normalized PDF of an Excel log or other types of documents. Those native files, the latter that I mentioned, are automatically given a nice normalized PDF for reviewing those documents and indexing it on processing. The indexing step is important because it allows for searching, which I will touch on I'll touch on in a few more topics, and extracting metadata for you to use in your filtering and culling. So those are the processing step is the first introduction into the platform, but as you all know, very important for you to get to the next phase, which is to be able to review and analyze your data. The review step is, as it sounds, is evaluating your electronically stored information for relevance, for privilege, for responsiveness, identifying what will be ultimately filtered out when you begin your production step, analyzing it for content and context, keywords, topics, people that are pertinent that you may not have been aware of from the outset, but as you get in and start reviewing and analyzing your data, identifying key witnesses and other discussions that are pertinent. The production step, which is next, as most of you are aware of, is delivering that electronically stored information that has been reviewed, culled, identified as what to be produced and what to be suppressed, and delivering it in the appropriate industry standard delivery mechanism, which is our production volume, our production folders with our volumes of, depending on the type of production you are required to exchange, either TIFF images or the PDF folder, the load files, the text files, and the natives. And finally, and this may be a step that not everyone has thought of, the presentation step. This is the final step. Once you've produced and you're using your electronically stored, your ESI, before an audience, whether it's at a depot or a hearing or trial, you are, it enables you to better display this, especially if it's in the native or near native forms, to an audience, to elicit either further information or to prove a point, to validate existing facts or position based on the metadata that you can point to, the date, the time, the author, you know, again, going back to proving that fact or position or persuading an audience. And again, this source, this graphic is from Duke Law School. There are a few other great references or resources that I'll share with you. aceds.org, ACEDS, the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists, and the Sedona Conference's website, and again, that's the Sedona Conference website, are also really great resources to explaining the eDiscovery process, the standards. You know, if you want to learn more, if you're considering taking the ACEDS exam, if you just want to be the resident expert in your firm, to you know, to discuss with the powers that be, with your attorney, with your supervisors, whether or not they would be interested in funding your exam fees. You know, there's a lot of great resources out there for you to think about. So our next slide, the LexB workflow, is is slightly different, but more of the same of the steps that we just went through. Your planning and collection, you know, organizing your communication with your client, letting them know on the front end what types of things to look for, auditing what they have, what you have requested, reaching out to LexB for potential collection of PST files, those container files of emails. LexB will do that for their regular billable rate. It is usually a somewhat painless process. Sometimes it takes a few steps when it comes to LexB reaching out and logging into your client's email accounts. If any of you have had that experience with us, you know what I'm talking about, the validation code or the key that, you know, we may email you and ask you for. Being familiar with that process is helpful on the front end. Culling, you know, you can also ask your client, could they potentially cull their data before they extract it and give it to you? They may have IT support on site that can do that very initial culling process. And then the processing, review, production, and et cetera that we discussed, preparing you for depositions and motions, and then for trial or appeal. More specifically, to the workflow process, not to LexB itself. A lot of this that we're about to talk about is general workflow steps to the industry, and then a few at the end that are LexB specific, especially our indexing tool that is pretty cool. I'll talk about that. I'm sure you guys have all heard us all talk about our Uber index that we get excited about. So starting with production specs, the load files. Those load files that we refer to all the time. So the Opticon is the most common, the OPT file. That's our mapping file. We use that we convert it and use it to map the files, the appropriate files upon upload. The DAT file is what contains the metadata. So this is what comes from opposing counsel typically when you're ingesting one of their productions. These are the things that we need and that you want to make sure you have before you even send it to us. If you have an ESI order in place, and I do want to get to that because that is, again, I think so important for you to have a handle on and to have shared with Lexby from the beginning of your case. It will be what you can refer back to if your opposing counsel doesn't give you the industry standard production spec and gives everyone a headache, because we will come back to you and say, we can either create an upload mapping file for you, and if there's no DAT file, you won't have the metadata that you requested and are most likely required to exchange per an ESI order. So just knowing ahead of time, once you get something, whether you get it by a link or a hard drive from opposing counsel, you can take a peek before you even send it to us to ensure that you have those load files to the specifications in your ESI order. ESI orders are, as I said, are important. We offer a standard ESI order, Lexby does, if you have not created one before, or if you're just interested to see what, what we have created as a very broad industry standard order. That is important for you to, again, be able to refer back to if you feel like you are not being given what has been agreed on. That is usually the time when keywords are brought into the picture, or sometimes soon after, but they will probably be mentioned if not given the specific list in the order itself. The standard metadata. We've talked about metadata a little bit. That's the two from CC, BCC, the date fields, the author, date last modified. That will all be present in emails, as well as some loose files. And standard metadata fields across eDiscovery are those, there are a few exceptions, a few different vendors may call it something different. That's when we create those custom import tags for you, which may mean nothing to some of you, but some of you have probably seen those under your custom tags, so that we can import that data, which is important. It comes from, the DAT file and the metadata from the other vendor, but they may just have some subtle nuance to how they address it or word it. But typically, there is a standard set of metadata fields. And that, again, should be addressed in a standard ESI order, what type of metadata you should be exchanging. So if you find that after we ingest a production from opposing counsel that you don't have the metadata fields that are referred to in your ESI order, that will be a tool for you to go back to opposing counsel and let them know that they have not provided the required metadata. An ESI order will also usually reference what type of production, a TIFF production versus a PDF production. What is the difference? A PDF production is standard, which is a multi-page PDF. It is going to be a smaller size file, a smaller gigabyte count, because there are multi-page PDFs versus a TIFF production, which is a single page image. So you may have a document that is 55 pages. In the PDF production, it's one document that's 55 pages. In the TIFF production, it's 55 images for document number one. So that's just something to be aware of. If you haven't looked at your ESI orders, if you have one in your case, to see what type of production you are supposed to be providing, it would be stipulated there if you are supposed to provide that TIFF production, which again is a little higher in gigabyte count, and that really more affects your hosting and exchanging, uploading and downloading. The time that it takes to upload and download something that's larger versus smaller. Processing is the time it takes for your data to process in our processing queue. As it sounds, those documents get ingested and they are in line in processing. Some of you may be familiar with the timeliness of processing, and you may reach out to us to let us know that you think something is taking longer than normal for processing to complete, a couple considerations to think about are what type of documents are you having processed? There are instances when there are data-dependent issues or low-level corruption for a document that's not an overly big Excel file or a 5,000-page PDF, and it's something small. It's a one-page PDF, and it should move along through the queue without issue. And in those instances, there is usually, if it is stuck, some sort of low-level corruption. So considering what type of document it is, if it's something that should be moving along, reach out to us for sure and let us keep an eye on it so that we can potentially resolve any issues with that type of corruption or notify you that we need to replace it. If it is, as I referenced, a 500-page or 5,000-page PDF that you've ingested all at once and are trying to process all at once, just be mindful of the fact that that is going to take extra processing time. The process of processing itself is taking your native, creating a normalized PDF, indexing it, so scanning the native and scanning the image, and creating that index that you can use for your search function, and populating all of those tabs in the doc viewer, the native tab, HTML, PDF, and text tabs. So that is the process and why it sometimes takes longer than we would like. Indexing, I just mentioned, in Lexbe, and this is Lexbe specific, upon ingestion, Lexbe simultaneously indexes the native and the image. So you not only get the benefit of the OCR text, which you find under that text file, but you get the benefit of the index of the native document. So the native could be, an example I love to use is an Excel sheet that has hidden cells or nested columns that you can't see with the naked eye. The PDF, the image, does not render those hidden or nested, those hidden cells or columns. And therefore, OCR would not extract it. And therefore, indexing it in maybe another platform would not show you or give you the ability to search on that hidden text. In Lexbe, we simultaneously index the native, which is what populates that HTML tab. And that is the extracted text from the native document. And that is where you would find that hidden text. So you may search for a word and look at the image and not see it there. You would refer to the hits tab, which I'll show you. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the hits tab, but it's pretty popular to those who do use it. And the HTML tab, which is where you'd be able to view the extracted native text and see that hidden text that you had just searched on. And that is what we call our Uber index. That is why we think it's so powerful and amazing, because you have the ability to search both the native and the image. Deduplication, by default in Lexbe, is run vertically. The vertical dedupe means it is run within a custodian. So if you have multiple PSTs, say you're that client that has 45 custodians and 45 PSTs that are uploaded, and you assign a custodian upon upload, there may be 5 or 10 of the same email that has been sent back and forth to those 5 or 10 custodians. The theory behind the vertical deduplication and why it is the default method in Lexbe is if there are multiple custodians or parties in a case, and for example, custodian number 3 is dismissed, and you decide this party has been dismissed, we will not be responding on their behalf, and therefore we will not be using their PST. We'll delete it out of the case. If by some chance custodian number 3 was uploaded first, that is what would be considered the prime. So of exact duplicates, the algorithm finds the prime, which is the first one ingested into the case. If you deleted by chance that prime, then you would lose the ability to search on that if you had also excluded duplicates. So that is why by default we run vertical duplication, deduplication. If, however, you are in a position, and many clients find themselves wanting to run deduplication horizontally across the entire case, that is something that we can definitely do. It is a process of creating a custom tab for each of those custodians. So we would create that tag by management, custom doc field, creating a tag for each of the custodians, and simply moving that designation over via a multi-doc update. We would populate that custom field for each of those respective custodians, remove the default custodian designation, run horizontal dedupe across your case, assigning duplicates across all custodians, and at that point it becomes a preference. If you intend to keep the duplicates in your case and simply filter them out because you are required to not produce dupes in that ESI order, or maybe you are required to produce dupes but to identify that they are duplicative, then you would keep those in your case and simply create a filter quick link to easily isolate the duplicates or suppress them. If you chose to delete the duplicates to bring down the hosting size of your case, there is something that we provide those clients with called the dupe custodian log. So you will always be able to identify the other custodians that had that duplicative document or email family and usually download to a briefcase so that you can access them again if you need them. And the kind of log that we export for you would allow you to ingest any one of those back into the platform easily without much, without significant work on our part. So that's dedupe and the vertical versus global or horizontal. So I'll skip demist for now and talk about near duplication, which is another service that we provide. Deduplication you can run on your own upon upload each time that's available to you as a user, as a client user from the upload page. Near duplication is something that you can request professional services run for you, which will run an algorithm across the case that will identify all documents that are 50% or more similar in text. So the threshold in LexB for near duplication is 50% or more similarity. An example of a document that would not qualify as a duplicate but would as a near duplicate, even though to the naked eye it may appear to be the exact same document, would be a red line version of a contract. That contract may have been scanned in or scanned multiple times, therefore giving it a different MD5 hash value because it was scanned at a different date and time. It could have been faxed. It could have been saved. It's the Word version of, you have the exact same document. It's textually the exact same text in the document, but one is the Word version and one is a PDF. That is where near duplication becomes extremely helpful because you can identify them in a near dupe group. It will also give you, again, up to that 50% threshold, documents that are like documents but maybe not that almost exact dupe. Once near duplication is run, we refer you to the dupe groups page where you'll see your groups have been assigned group numbers, and you can click on the group link and see from that browse screen all of those documents that are within that group. DNIST is a service we can also run across your case, which simply identifies kind of the junk files, those files that are going to have no substance or value. It's a processing file. It's something that is not going to have anything substantive to review or search on. So you can identify those and remove them or suppress them from any further review. I'm going to switch over to the LexB platform, but before I do that, I want to ask a couple of polling questions of you, if you don't mind. This helps us shape our future training sessions so that we can really get a good idea of what is useful and helpful to our clients. I am going to launch the first question now. Please just take a few seconds to respond to that. And we'll make for any of our attendees, we will be able to provide a podcast streaming version or PDF of our webinar today. And we'll launch a second question. Okay. Thank you for participating in that, for taking the time to answer those questions for us. I am going to, I already have wrapped up my webinar. Not my webinar, my PowerPoint for you, and going to move on with the presentation in the platform. And I'm going to take a second to check to see if we have any questions yet. Feel free to submit them to me. As I said, during the presentation, I'll stop in between each of my chunks of the platform that I want to go through with you just to see if anyone has any follow-ups that are specific to what we just covered. So as I mentioned earlier, tips for uploading. Something that you can do as a QC check, which is something that we do when we upload for you, is first to filter on once processing has completed. So you want to wait until you get that processing complete email to make sure that the issue that you're finding isn't the fact that just the normalized PDFs haven't finished being created in the processing steps. So we would go into the data set. So for my example, I'm in Browse, but for you specifically, it would be you go to the upload batch that you just finished uploading. And you filter on placeholders. And there are two types. And this may be familiar territory for some of you. And for those of you who aren't, you'll find the placeholders here in this box. The first type is unsupported. An unsupported placeholder means, I think I sort of touched on this, this before. It is a file type that cannot render a normalized PDF. The native is available to you, but the normalized PDF cannot be, like, as I said, rendered. So an example would be an MP3 file or a video file. There are many listed on our help page, and if you ever need to find them quickly from your browse, you can just go to help, the help screen, and enter placeholders and files. It will give you a list of the different help pages that deal with it, and you'll find the one that gives you the nice list and table of what is supported, what should render a normalized PDF, and what will not. So when you are viewing those unsupported file types, you will be able to download the native. So here you'll see your placeholder. And if you go to your Originals tab, it will prompt you to download whatever the type of file that is. So this is a DAT file, for example. In your production uploads or your native ingestion, this will probably not be the kind that you run into. This is more a function of the type of data that I have in my demo, but a good example of how this window pops up. So in your QC, you'll want to make note of the fact that you have some unsupported file placeholders. The second step would be to go back and filter on the second type of placeholder. I apologize, everyone. I'm having just a little bit of a connection issue. And you would achieve filtering on the second type of placeholder by going back through the steps that I just went through. I would go from Browse to Filter, Filter on Placeholders, and I would choose, instead of Unsupported, Fail to Convert. Those types of placeholders, those failed to convert placeholders, are a different animal. Those are not necessarily the documents that will not render a normalized PDF, but for some reason, that document that is a supported file cannot render a normalized PDF. And you will see again that placeholder under the PDF tab that we were just looking at. The native again is available to you. So you have the native available in both instances. However, if you're concerned about producing those placeholders that are failed to convert placeholders, you can reach out to professional services, and we can force processing on those failed to convert placeholders. It is not always successful, but it doesn't, even though it is a billable service from professional services, it does not take usually more than half an hour. I am going to next talk about, so in the QC process, I would like to add this. So professional services does, if we've done the upload for you, filter on those placeholders prior to releasing the job to you. If the amount of placeholders, if the threshold is less than 10% of the documents that have been ingested, that meets with that's within the normal range for industry standard, and it therefore passes QC for us. So even if you see a placeholder and it's a job that we have uploaded for you, then it may be because it passed because of that 10% threshold. And if you see that, again, you can reach out to us to force that processing and try to create normalized PDF on those. Another thing to think about when you are uploading is the expansion. So if you are questioning, for those of you who are also watching your gigabyte counts in your cases, if you have a PST that is maybe 5 gigabytes, it could potentially double once it expands in the platform, which means once it expands, and it is essentially a container for all of those files inside it. So once all of those files have expanded, you will go up in the gigabyte count in the storage space required to host that. It could double. It could go from 5 to 10. So if that's something that you weren't aware of before, that's another consideration. The message expansion, not just with PSTs, also happens with any zip or RAR file. Understanding how to organize your data in the platform is a very powerful tool for paralegals. Using custom fields is what I want to get to next. I'm still having an issue with my connection and my screen is frozen, so bear with me as I talk you through what I think is really helpful about using custom fields. For those of you who haven't used custom fields before, you would access that by going to the Account tab, Manage Custom Fields, and then creating either a new section if you haven't created custom fields at all before, or picking a section that you already have populated that you're just adding, for example, witnesses. And you've identified a few more witnesses that you've seen upon review, so you know you're going to go in and add a few more of those. Some attorneys like to use folders, which I understand. It may be visually more appealing. Folders are useful, and I'll show you in a sec where you can access those folders. However, the folder is a one-to-one ratio, whereas you can use a custom tag for as many different documents as you can think of. You can assign documents to a folder, for example, discovery responses. If your attorney likes to be able to go in, click on a folder called discovery responses and see everything that was responsive or produced by opposing counsel. That's one way. You can also code all of those documents with your custom coding under the Manage Custom Doc field. So you can use both. I prefer the custom doc fields because those become filters as well for you once you tag documents to those fields. And then that allows you to layer on filters in the future. Would start identifying documents that are representative of that search term of negligence, and I would start tagging them to that for use in the future. You can use that to assist in, okay, here we go, assist in preparation for review sets, production, upcoming depositions. So to get you back to what I was referring to, I will show you quickly the placeholder, failed to convert, and you'll see in this case, for this instance, there are 8. So you'll know, and you can explain to your attorney, there is 1 unsupported file placeholder and 8 unsupported, or 8 failed to convert, and this is what they are, and this is how we would deal with them. So that he or she is not in the future in a review set looking at a document, gets to the next document, and the PDF tab is a placeholder. And then he wants to know from you, well, what is this? Why is it here? And how do I get rid of it? So you'll be able to easily answer him, well, this is what we have that we would just produce in native. And this is what we have that we can request that Lexby process again, force processing on to see if they can render a normalized PDF. And again, they're both available in the native format. So if you ever find that you have, even if it's the fail to convert type, some that will not convert, you would simply notify your opposing counsel that there are some that are being produced in native format only. And I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, have seen that native placeholder, native production placeholder, I should say. Okay, so getting to the next cool trick that I was talking about, helping you find the needle in the haystack, essentially, using these custom doc fields. So under Account, Manage Custom Case Fields. Oh, under Management, Manage Custom Doc Fields, you'll see some that I've pre-populated. So here's that example I was using: complaint, negligence, documents that will either prove or disprove the negligence issue, documents that you would use in a dispository or responsive pleading. Keywords, if you do have those keywords that are exchanged and that you must run against your data, here's where you would populate a custom tag before you run your search, so that once the search is run, you can multi-doc edit those search results to your keywords. Witnesses is another one that I like to use, because in preparation for upcoming depositions and cross or direct exam, you can, as you go through the process of reviewing for responsiveness, also identify those documents that you want to use for something else. And I'll show you where you do that when you're in the review set, and how you would do that, again, if you ran a search and then did a multi-doc edit. And then another example I'd like to show you, if we have time, is when producing a production. When getting to that step, identifying documents that you want to add to a production before you actually add it, and then doing that filter process, or doing a filter process I'm going to show you, that will get you kind of around the validation steps headache. So you've seen these. We've talked about the custom tags. Let me show you quickly the folder. So even using all of those custom tags that we just looked at, you can still create folders. You could create one called, again, Discovery, and use that for every production that comes in, so that your attorney would be clicking only here. You would see a tree of folders. This would be Discovery, and they could click on that and go to all of those that had been assigned to that. And again, just something to remember, that's a one-to-one. One document, this budget document, can only belong to one folder. It can belong to as many tags as you can come up with. Another helpful tool when organizing your data is creating filter quick links. So if you filter on a custodian and you apply your filter, and you want to create a quick link, and you can see one that I've already created here would be exclude dupes. So after running dedupe, you would filter, exclude your duplicates, and then I created this. And to create a quick link, you would do that by editing the most recent link or filter that you have just run, and naming it whatever you just filtered on. And you will want to share it, so that will be a benefit to everyone in your team that works in this case. Pinning it would just give you access only. And then you'll see here is that quick link. So from Browse, whoever wants to review all of the documents associated with that were part of the FastOut upload that he is a custodian assigned to, they can just simply click on this quick link instead of going through those steps that I just followed. So that can be very helpful. If your attorney has a lot of documents that they like, and they're like, hey, can you pull up that one that I like, that, the one that has to do with that 2002 budget, you can create attorney hot docs, and you can associate them with one of these doc fields, call it attorney hot docs, and as many different documents as you know that they ask for a lot, you would code it to that custom doc field, either in the doc viewer or by multi-doc edit. And by applying a filter to filter on attorney hot docs, like we just did for Andrew Fastow, you would then go in and edit that filter here, and then they could always see their attorney hot docs filter. So that's another nice one. I definitely want to get to the search and production steps because I think that these next two things are going to make your jobs easier and help you quickly isolate documents. I am going to move on to my search template. And this is what I was referring to. For those of you who haven't seen this before, let me know. I would be happy to send you the shell of this. And it will come with this link already populated. This is something that we have created. This will take you directly into the platform, and you will fill out the terms. So I would just type in the term, copy and paste, type it out. Any iteration of that term, you can give, an additional rows, and then you click on the link here. It will prompt you the very first time you do it. You want to have Lexby open. You want to be in that case. And I did this earlier before the webinar started, so it didn't prompt me this time. But then don't be alarmed if the first time it prompts you to log in again. And you'll see it opens in a separate tab. So here are my Enron docs. I have 669. I may want to go back and record those hits. Maybe you have to exchange hit counts. So I would do that here, as well as multi-doc edit all of these to Enron. I would have created these fields prior to doing this. So if you run your search, you get your results. If you haven't created your custom doc field yet, you're going to have to run the search again. I have created a custom field for my keywords. I would organize it as such as well, so you know that those are keywords. They're not a Boolean, they're not anything with a long search argument. These are agreed upon keywords. Those documents have been tagged to Enron, so I can then go back and filter from the browse screen on that Enron filter, and I will come back to the 669. And this is another example. You could create a filter quick link if you chose to, if there are a lot of people that are going to be in it that don't want to have to go through the exercise of going through the filter steps. I will show you one more example from the search template because I want to show you another benefit of it. If you see up here, this is incorporating the Boolean search function as well as the stemming search and the fuzzy search. So you would potentially get more hits using this search template because it incorporates all three of those than if you just did a search from the search screen and chose one option. So that's another benefit to you. That's going to pull in more. If that is a benefit to you, it's going to pull in more and be more inclusive. Once you go through the process of searching and tagging documents and you're ready to start putting together your production sets, that is when you may run into those inconsistencies in coding. From the doc viewer, when coding documents, if the propagation of coding does not remain clicked, and we always suggest that you leave it on, you may accidentally, or your reviewers may accidentally code a family, an email family, inconsistently. Lexby is by design set up to have families, to require that families are consistently coded before they can be produced out of the platform. Many of you, I am sure, have run into a validation nightmare when you're trying to get a production out the door. Before you ever get those documents running in a production or like running through the validation steps, there is a nice trick to getting to those problem children before you're at validation. You would create a custom field for inconsistencies or redaction, to be redacted. Here I started before our webinar today, and I started with productions Prod 08. So you could go into the documents the attorneys have isolated as being coded. So whatever the parameters are that they give you, get together everything to go out into production today that has been coded as responsive and privilege, or get together everything that has been coded as responsive. If any of those are part of a family member or part of an email family, and when reviewing by the attorneys was done, they did not, they disabled the propagation of coding, then you could have a parent that is responsive, an attachment that is non-responsive, and an attachment that is privileged. That will not pass validation. Lexby will say, hey, you have this family you need to look at because one is responsive and good to go. One shouldn't be in this production because it's non-responsive, and one is privileged. And it won't spit out, it won't put into the production the parent that's responsive and then suppress the child. It will require you to resolve the coding so that the entire family is either all responsive and you redact the privileged portion, or all non-responsive and nothing goes in the production, or all privileged and it is identified with a Bates number but suppressed from your production. So the way that you would do that is, again, starting with whatever the parameters that your attorney has instructed you to craft the shell of the production. You find those documents, you multi-doc edit them to this prod 822-2018 prod. Then you filter on that tag, and we're running into kind of the end of our hour. I'll see if I have any set up quickly that I can show you. So I will filter here on, say my instructions are responsive and Andrew Fastow. The first round is definitely anything of his, and they think they've gone through and done all their coding on his custodian file. They filtered on his custodian designation and went through. So I've got 406 that are responsive. And I'm going to add those to my prod tag, not to a production yet, but to the tag. And I could have also thrown in Andrew Fastow. I was just moving a little too fast for my own good. And now I'll add that other data set, so it's not just responsive documents. They're saying all the Fastow and everything should be coded as responsive, because that's the first thing that we reviewed was his PST. To make sure that you don't have those inconsistency issues, this is a nice little trick. And it could be, and my example could be many things. It could be another witness. It could be more than one witness. And hopefully for our purpose today, this will pull in some family members. And if it doesn't, I'm happy to explain or show in a different demo a family that has those coding issues. So you see I'm adding to these three to my 822 production. And my next step would be to create a review set to throw these in, which most of you, if not all of you, should know that creating a review set and adding your documents and then starting your review will pull in email family members. So your number of documents in the review set would normally go up. So I've created that review set. I've tagged a mixture of docs to that production tab. Now I'm going to filter back to that tab for the production that I populated with hopefully inconsistencies, so I can show you. And I will add these to my review set and start it to see if that pulls other members in. And to do that, under the multi-doc edit and under a few more tabs, you'll see review set and the one I just created. and I'll add my docs. So there they are. You can get back to that review set by one of two ways. You can go back to it. Oh, sorry, the next step is go back to it from this page and start it. So here is where I am hoping that it will expand for our purpose today. And it did. So it went up by 4. So it pulled in 4 family members, and it could be just one email family. A lot of times it doubles in size, which I know is sometimes painful for those who are setting the review sets up and then reviewing them. I can go back in by clicking here. I can also go back out to browse and filter, and from the filter screen, grab the review set. That is how you get into it without going to the review set for the purpose of reviewing. So without going to the batch function, but just getting back into this universe that's in the 400 or that's in the 822 review set. So now I'm here, then I will filter on, okay, do your checks. This is your checks and balances. First filter on privilege. Were you instructed to include privilege? Well, let's see. If you weren't, then you'll know right off the bat you've got a problem. If when filtering on your review set, you have some that are privilege or attorney work product. And this could be the email family problem here. So you would go in, or you would talk to your attorney and say, we have this many documents that should not be, that are inconsistently coded, should not be in this production. We need to address these now before we throw them into our production and get to the validation stage. You would want to do the same step that I just went through for non-responsive, because you know those should definitely not be in what you add to the universe of your next production. So hopefully that will help you guys along. I'm happy to answer additional questions. Like I said, if you are in a case, you know, few weeks from now, and you run into something that we touched on here, and it may not have clicked for you then, but it's clicking now, and you have a question about it, just reach out to us. I'd be happy to, you know, do another little demo or send you help links, and you know, outline how to handle that, what we just went through, that validation issue. Running your productions. Another thing to consider is if you have a deadline and you know your deadline is Friday, let everyone else think that it is Thursday. I know that we all do that in the office, or I used to. If I knew that my deadline with mailing days was Friday, I would try to get everyone on the Wednesday schedule so that we were trying to get that production finalized on Wednesday, allowing time to, you know, mail it back in the day when we were just mailing it. But it's still something to consider when you're running an eDiscovery production, because running a production takes processing time, and the bigger the data set, the more processing that we're talking about, and that harkens back to the processing that you monitor on ingestion. The bigger those files are, the longer the processing steps will take. And when you're running a production, there's added processing because it may not be indexing everything like it did on ingestion, but it's batesing, and it's creating, especially in those TIFF productions, single page TIFFs with bates on them for every single page of every document that you have going into that production. So in a perfect world, you would want to be past validation and start running a day, you know, maybe not much more than that, but you want to give yourself a nice cushion. It has happened. It is possible to run something in a day and have it ready to spit out, but those are smaller ones. So just keep that in mind. You know, these are all things that we want to share with you guys so that it makes your experience more seamless. It makes your jobs and your boss's jobs easier, and fills you with less stress and turmoil. The one thing that I did not discuss that I would like to real quick is exporting the documents out of Lexby. I love the briefcase function. So for anyone who hasn't used Briefcase, it's a quick and easy. I'll just show you how to set it up and let you know what it looks like when it's downloaded. Say, for example, I want Andrew Fastow because his depo is coming up. I would grab those documents by using a pre-populated tag or filter that I've already created. This is after a review has been done and custom fields have been populated. And I would export them to my briefcase. And here you have options. You can name using doc title, Bates number if these are Bates documents, if this is something that's been produced already, and that's how you want to refer to them, and that's what you want to see in the folders that are downloaded from your briefcase. That is basically what you're choosing here. If you want to stamp those existing Bates numbers on the page, make sure to click this. And you always want to send yourself that notification upon completion. And I should have one in here already. And once it's done, once you get that notification email, you're going to go to download your briefcase. Okay. And if you have, it will populate here. And I don't want to do it because we are running out of time and it does process. So it does take a while. And the more documents you add, the longer it will take to process, but usually in under an hour or two. You would be able to download it from this page. Always for your benefit, for the person downloading it and printing those documents that will be used as exhibits at Mr. Andrew Fastow's deposition, click this box, insert separator sheet, and then if I had a document or a briefcase here that I could show you with, create merged PDF would be available for me to click on. That will merge everything into one PDF as well, and you can print, you can hit print once, and there will be separator sheets in between each of the files that you grabbed to put into this Andrew Fastow briefcase. And that will be where your doc breaks are. So that's another one of my favorite tips. And I know that in preparing depo or hearing or trial exhibits, that would have helped me immensely. And at the end of the day, our job is to keep all of you happy, to make you LexB experts so that you can go back to your attorneys and impress them with all of your expertise in eDiscovery. So thank you again for joining me today, and please keep in mind our weekly training series that we offer. You can submit questions to be covered in the weekly training series. Upon registration for each of the Thursday trainings, you can submit your questions. And we almost always have time to cover all the questions that get submitted, and sometimes if we don't have a question, we will get in depth into one feature that maybe not a lot of people know about. So keep that in mind, and thank you all again for joining us. Have a great day.